Hello and welcome everyone to our webinar presentation today titled Visa Bulletin, What's Going On? My name is Ron Hoppe. I'm the CEO of Worldwide Health Staff Solutions, and it is, as always, my pleasure to spend this time together with you today to provide you with useful information to help keep you informed and to provide you with insights from leading experts in the healthcare immigration industry. The topic of visa processing times and visa retrogression has become increasingly active as the processing times have slowly continued to back up. And that's what we're going to talk about today. What is going on? Why is it going on? And what are the prospects for the foreseeable future? Just before we do jump right in, let me just share a couple of things with you. As always, we would appreciate you just dropping a quick note in the chat section of your screen, letting us know where you're joining from today, what country you're joining us from. We're always very, very interested to see who is in our audience and where they're from. So if you would be good enough to take a moment to do that, that would be appreciated. Also, I know that there are many questions around this topic, and we want to answer as many of your questions today as we can. And we will do that at the end of our presentation. So if you have a question as we go along, please feel free to drop your question in the chat section of your screen. My colleague Allie, wave Allie. My colleague Allie is on the presentation with me, and she'll be monitoring the questions as they come in, and we'll do our very best to respond to as many of those as we can at the end of our presentation. So thank you again for joining us today. I look forward to the conversation that we will have this morning. So with that, let's jump right in. So I think at the outset of our discussion around visa retrogression, I want to just do a quick recap or quick review of priority dates, because retrogression is calculated off priority dates. So I think it's important that we understand how our priority dates established, right? And what causes retrogression. So your or a visa priority date or an application priority date is really very simply stated. It is the date on which a new I-140 petition is entered into the USCIS system. This normally happens within a few days of a petition being received. And the fact that a priority date is assigned is not an indication that that application has been approved. It's simply a confirmation of the date on which that application was received and the date on which it was entered into the USCIS system. So that is where and how priority dates are established. Now, to the question of retrogression or processing times, more simply stated, why are processing times shorter at some points and longer at other points? How does that happen? What factors contribute to that? And again, just covering some of the basics here so that we have a clear understanding as we head into the rest of our conversation. You may be aware that the United States has a quota or a fixed number of visas that are available in the EB3 category. That number of visas is fixed at 145,000 per year. Visas are processed in the order in which they are received. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we go along. And once 145,000 visas have been issued, in a given fiscal year. The U.S. government operates on a fiscal year, not the calendar year. And the U.S. government fiscal year runs from October 1st through to September 30th of the following year. So once those 145,000 visas have been issued in a fiscal year, no additional visas can be issued until the next October rolls around and there's a new annual allotment of visas that are made available. So just to be very clear, there's 145,000 visas available. And when those visas are issued, then no additional visas are issued. Now, at the same time, while there's a limit on the number of visas that are being issued, there is no limit on the number of applications that can be filed. Even though we are in times of retrogression, there is absolutely no limit, no prohibition, no restriction whatsoever on the ability of any employer to continue to file EB-3s. So what we have happening is when the number of visa applications in process are greater than the number of available visas in the current fiscal year, right, then we start to get this backlog, this backing up of visas that is referred to as visa retrogression. Right? Visa retrogression, if you think of it as standing in line, okay, standing in line, let's say for, what would be an example? Say for airline flight, okay? And let's say there's an airline that's flying to a particular location on a schedule that has a certain number of flights, right? And the first people in line get on the flight, but when that flight is filled, right, the next person or the first person that didn't get on has to wait for the next flight. And in this case, the next flight would be the new annual allocation of visas that's made available each year on October the 1st. So visa retrogression is simply nothing more than a condition that exists when the number of petitions in the system is greater than the number of visas that are currently available. The Visa Bulletin also, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, is published on a monthly basis, and the Visa Bulletin represents the State Department's best estimate as to the number of visas that are remaining for the year in relation to the number of applications that are in the system, again, based on a first in, first out basis that I'll talk about here in a moment. So next slide, please. So having shared with you a little bit about how priority dates are established and what causes retrogression, this chart here shows what processing times have been going back to 2018. This is in the EB-3 visa category, also known as green card or permanent residency. And this is the category in which 99% of registered nurses are processed. So as you look at this chart that goes from 2018 through to the first quarter of 2025, the first thing I think you would observe is that the processing times are changing, and at various times they're shorter and at other times they're longer. So if we just look across this graph from left to right, you can see that back in 2020 and towards the end of 2020, visa processing times were just in excess of 3 years. Okay, that was in 2020. Then when the new visa allotment became available at that time, you can see the processing times went down considerably. And then we have a number of bars there that are kind of flat. That's the COVID. That really represents the COVID time where very, very few visa applications were being received, or a lower number were being received. And so the number of petitions in the system was not far in excess of the number of available visas. During that time also, there was very, very few, hardly any family-based EB3 applications. And those family-based, the numbers that otherwise would have been taken up by family-based petitions were rolled over for employment-based positions or petitions. And you can see we have the processing times marked here at 12 months. During this time, the Visa Bulletin actually showed as being current. But even when the Visa Bulletin is current, it was at that time taking 10, 11, 12, 14 months for a petition to go from filing to visa issuance. At the end of COVID, when family-based petitions started to pick up again, you can see processing times went up for a couple of quarters, and they started to come down again for much of 2024. But then we see in the latter part of 24, the summer of 24, heading into the fall of 24, we had a significant rise in the retrogression date. And then you can see in October, on the bar, October 24, the processing date came down again pretty significantly when the new fiscal year allocation of visas was made available. Now, since that time, we had expected that the visa priority dates would move forward, at least month by month. And somewhat surprisingly, that has not been the case over the last 4 months or so, where we have seen the visa priority date essentially stuck on December 1st, 2022. And of course, the effect of the priority date not moving forward, the calendar does move forward. So if the visa priority date isn't moving forward at least the same amount, then the processing time overall is in fact getting longer. So today we have the March 2025 Visa Bulletin, and we're still at this December 2022. So you can see the processing times right now are just over 2 years. They're at about 26 or 27 months. Still not nearly as long as they have been as recently as 2024, but it is longer than we thought it would be and hoped it would be. So this is sort of the most current update, and we'll talk about some future, some thoughts on what the Visa Bulletin may look like in the future in just a moment here. Next slide, please. So what I thought I would do today is share with you what some of the leading immigration attorneys in the country are saying about their expectations related to processing times and visa retrogression. This is to bring you a number of different perspectives from people that I consider to be experts in the field, so that those of you that join these sessions regularly aren't just hearing from us or hearing my opinion or our opinion. So many of you will have been on previous webinar sessions, or you will be familiar with Mr. Chris Musillo. Chris is a managing partner at Musillo Unkenholt, a very large healthcare immigration firm here in the US. And when I spoke to Chris just a few days ago, his response to me was, unfortunately, my read is the Visa Bulletin doesn't move forward than a month or two between now and September. So Chris is thinking there's going to be some forward movement, but not a lot. He says, indeed, I expect that it will retrogress or become unavailable in late spring or summer. And that's simply consistent with what we've seen last summer when we got into that August, September, October timeframe, where all the visas for the year had been issued. So there was really no forward movement until October 1st. So this is one view from one authority in the industry. Next slide, please. Some of you will may have encountered this individual. Dwight Meifelt is also someone I've known for many years. Very, very well-known immigration attorney. And when I spoke with him about his thoughts on where he thought processing times would go, etc., his response was, President Trump is not a fan of family cases. Okay. This matters because the EB3 category is allocated between family cases and employment-based cases. So Dwight's view is President Trump is not a fan of family cases. If he tries to slow this down, it would be really good for us meaning employment-based visas. But who knows if and when that would happen. Beyond that, I think the forward progress is not going to be good for the immediate future. The slowdown in family cases at consulates because of COVID is over, and I'm not particularly optimistic, absent some other development. And then he finished his thought by saying, also, I could be wildly wrong. And I think, what Dwight is sharing here is that no one really has absolute insight or knowledge of what the priority dates are going to do. These are individuals that are experts offering their opinions. So that was what was shared by Dwight. And then next slide, please. And then Mike Hammond, who I believe many of you will be familiar with. Mike is very prolific in doing webinar presentations. He's joined us for numerous presentations that we've done, and Mike is certainly someone that I hold in the highest regard. And his opinion was a little more specific than the others. And he said, I believe the Visa Bulletin will move forward to March 2023 based on the filing chart in the Visa Bulletin. So a little bit more optimistic view there from Mike, thinking that we could see forward movement to March 2023 in the next coming months here. We actually thought we would be at March 2023 by now, but as you can see here, Mike continues to hold the view that we're going to get to March 2023, certainly within the current government fiscal year. Next slide, please. So to the question of what do we expect to happen from April through to September 2025. September 2025, as I mentioned before, is the end of the U.S. government fiscal year. And on October 1st, an additional 145,000 visas are made available. So we always expect to see the priority dates go forward at that time. I think as we look back over 22, 23, 24, over this April to September timeline, Al, if you can just go back to the chart, the processing times slide for a second. All right, thank you. So if we look across this graph and we look at what happened over the summertime, we can see last summer, as we got into the August-September timeline, the visa processing dates actually for a short period of time increased pretty significantly. Likewise, you can see as we got to the end of the summertime and we got into Q3 of 2023, the visa processing times went up, and likewise towards the latter part of 2020. So in short, we expect that there will be some forward movement, but that forward movement will be very modest. Again, the thought, and I support Mike Hammond's view of March 2023. But if that movement is going to take place, it's going to take place between now and the August Visa Bulletin, because I suspect once we get to the September Visa Bulletin, all the visas for the year will have been allocated. So we might see a temporary jump up in processing time. So to answer the question, where do we see visa processing times going? I think for those of you that have existing petitions, you should orient your planning and you're planning for employment and possible future relocation, your pending future relocation, around the fact that the priority date between now and September 30th probably isn't going to get too far past March of 2023. Okay, next slide, please. Or if we can catch up. Yeah, next slide, please. So the question then is, okay, that's very interesting information. It may be disappointing information, but the question at hand and what I want to spend a few minutes speaking to today to give you some practical information and insights that hopefully you can use is, firstly, for those of you that have an application in process. Maybe you have a priority date that's getting close to being current. Maybe you've had a petition filed, sometime in 23, 24, maybe even early in 25. A very fair and good question is, now what? Given that this is the priority dates, what should I be doing? And I think there's a couple of things that I would call out that I think can be very helpful to each of you in this time of waiting. Okay. So the first thing that I would say to you is, just because the priority date seems to be a long ways off doesn't mean that you should just kind of ignore the process and not pay attention to what's going on and not be familiar, because processing times can also change very quickly and they can move forward very quickly. In fact, there's currently 2 new pieces of legislation that have been introduced in Congress since President Trump came into office, which we take as a very hopeful sign. These are pieces of legislation specifically intended to increase the number of visas for nurses and physicians, as well as to speed the process in time. So regardless of what stage your application is in, I would encourage you strongly to be proactive, know what step in the process you are in, and make sure that you are acting in a proactive way to always be accomplishing what the next step in your process is. Okay. If you have gotten so far as an NVC fee bill being issued to you, right? For worldwide health staff applicants, we will pay that fee bill for you, but you have to pay the fee bill for family members. Whatever step or whatever part of the process you're at, make sure you understand exactly where you're at and what your next step or next requirement is. Is there certain documents that need to be collected? Do I need to take an English test? Do I need to do something else? Continue to be proactive so that when the next step is available to be taken, that you can take it immediately. Okay. Secondly is, regardless of where you are at in the process, if you have a currently pending application, it is very important that you complete the visa screen process as soon as possible. Some candidates think that their embassy interview date is, far into the future. All of a sudden, it's getting closer. Now they need to take an English test. Maybe they don't pass it on the first time. And now there's a panic to get your visa screen certificate in time for your embassy interview. That's completely unnecessary. Completely unnecessary. Complete your visa screen process ASAP. It's not going away. You're going to have to do it. It's not changing. It's not going to get any less expensive, right? So completing your visa screen process as early as you possibly can. Remember, your visa screen is valid for 5 years. Processing times are nowhere near 5 years right now, so you should have zero risk of your visa screen expiring. You're going to have to do it, so you may as well do it and have it done. And then lastly, I would simply encourage you and challenge you to keep a positive attitude, right? Remember, the glass is half full. And, you know, I appreciate if you're sitting there rolling your eyes saying, well, easy for him to say, but, my future is in the balance here. I have some urgent needs. I really want to get to the US. Easy for Ron to say, well, be optimistic. Well, we have a choice, right? We can be optimistic or we can be pessimistic. I choose to be optimistic. And I think the reason on which you can base your optimism, regardless of what the visa processing times are, is the fact that although it's taking longer than you would have hoped, the process works and the outcome is virtually assured. The EB3 process is a very well-established process. The visa application approval rate, if you're working with a bona fide employer and a competent recruitment organization, is approaching 100%. So the process works. So if you follow the steps in the process, you have a virtual 100% assurance that you're going to receive the visa. Now, the question is when, and nobody can answer that question for you with an exact date. If somebody tries to do that, they're lying and or delusional, right? So take heart in knowing that the process works, even if it's taking longer than we would like it to take, than you would like it to take. If you're doing the prescribed steps in the prescribed order with the support of your health staff case manager, you will be arriving in the United States as a permanent resident. You will be working and living in the US probably sooner than you think. So attitude, I believe, is a really key aspect of this. I appreciate that discouragement can creep in at times, but know that the process works. The process has been the same for just over 30 years now. And again, it is a virtual certainty that if your application is properly prepared, that you're being sponsored by a bona fide employer, you will be living and working in the United States. Next slide, please. So that was some insights and some hopefully useful advice to individuals that currently have applications in process. I'd like to take a moment and speak to our guests today that maybe are in a place where they have not yet started their immigration application to the US, and they're wondering, you may be wondering, should I start a visa application now? Maybe you're at a fork in the road of having to decide, do I want to start a US application? Do I want to go work somewhere in another country? Etc. And certainly appreciate that sort of situation. I know it happens a lot. But if ultimately your goal is to live and work in the United States, the answer to should I start a visa application now is emphatically yes. And the reason it's emphatically yes is for a couple of reasons that I've already touched on. One, regardless of the visa issuance date, there is absolutely no restriction, no limit, no barriers to new petitions being filed. Just want to be very, very clear on that point because sometimes applicants are asking if a petition can even be filed. At Worldwide Health Staff Solutions, we're filing many petitions every day and every week and every month, regardless of what the visa processing times are. And the reason it's important to get your petition filed as soon as you can is, as I mentioned before, essentially, all things being equal, petitions are processed on a first in, first out basis. Meaning, proverbially speaking, that an application received on Monday is going to go through the process and get to a visa interview and visa issuance ahead of a petition that's filed on Friday. Now, it's not exactly that way, that illustration, there's exceptions to that, but the point is, generally speaking, petitions are processed on a first in, first out basis. I'm very confident in saying that the sooner a petition is filed, the greater the likelihood that that visa is going to be issued ahead of petitions that are filed later is very, very high. Okay, so should I start a visa application now? If your goal is to live and work in the US at some point in your future, the answer is unequivocally yes. The road may be a little bumpy in terms of priority dates and not knowing what they are, and they're going to move forward and they might move back and they might move forward a lot, right? So the road may have some bumps, but the destination is assured, as I shared with in my comments on the previous slide about the EB3 process being very stable, very predictable. And I believe another reason for filing your petition now and getting that started is none of us knows what our life is going to look like tomorrow. And maybe tomorrow some circumstance has arisen that precludes you from being able to initiate a petition. So my encouragement to you is, if you are thinking that you would like to see yourself in the future living and working in the US, that the time to start a visa application is now. And even in doing so, it doesn't preclude you from possibly pursuing employment in other countries while your US application is in process. We have many candidates that we're working with that are destined for the US, but they are working in the interim time in the Gulf region. They're working in Europe, perhaps even in Australia or New Zealand. So just because you have a petition underway to the US, it doesn't preclude you from pursuing some shorter term opportunities in other countries. So that would be for those of you that are just wondering whether you should dip your toe into the pond, so to speak, to get started. The answer is clearly now is the time to do that. So next slide, please. One thing I do want to touch on, because it's been a topic of a lot of discussion, a lot of online chatter, is what I'm calling the H-1B visa paradox. And in response to the EB3 processing times getting longer, there's been an increasing discussion around, well, could I come on an H-1B visa? Couple things just to call out. First of all, just to make sure everybody understands, the EB3 visa is a permanent residency visa, never expires, never needs to be renewed, as long as you maintain your residency requirements. H-1B visa is a non-immigrant visa that's going to be issued somewhere for 2 to 3 years and can be, not guaranteed, but can be extended for up to 6 years. So the reason this discussion, I think, is getting a lot of attention is, even though the H-1B visa is a non-immigrant visa, it's possible, right? It's possible that you could, with a successful H-1B application, be in the US much faster than you could be with the EB3 visa. So a couple of things just to make sure everybody understands. When you hear about opportunities to come to the US on H-1B visas, such opportunities do exist. And if successful, you may get to the US faster. That's true. What's also true is your H-1B petition may be denied. I think the current experience from employers and immigration attorneys that I speak with, they're seeing an H-1B visa approval rate of somewhere in the range of 50 to 60%. That means 40 to 50% of applications are being denied. Now, we have done previous webinars specifically on the details of H-1B and how it works and the pros and the cons. And I would invite you to visit our YouTube channel, Worldwide Health Staff Solutions, where you can find a recording of our previous H-1B visa webinars. I believe we've actually done several of them. And I would encourage you, if H-1B is on your mind, to fully inform yourself. Because when you see these promises of you can be in the US in 6 months, it's not that simple, and it's far from a certain thing, right? So I'll comment just very briefly, because I get this question a lot. It's and the question goes something like, I know you need an H-1B. To get an H-1B, I know you need a BSN. I have a BSN. Can I get an H-1B? Well, that's true. Nurses to be considered for a H-1B must have a BSN, and there's many nurses that have BSN degrees. So that requirement is generally met quite easily. The H-1B program gets considerably more complex because the employer also has to meet certain requirements, and the employer has to be able to demonstrate that the department in which you are being offered a position employs mostly BSN graduate nurses. And for many employers, they're unable to make that representation because employers here still employ large numbers of associate's degree nurses. So while H-1B may look like a no-brainer from your perspective as the candidate, the complexity of H-1B visas rests very much with the employer requirements, and the fact that the adjudication of such applications is entirely at the discretion of the officer who's reviewing that case. So you could have 10 H-1B petitions filed for 10 perfectly qualified nurses by the same employer for the same department. And 4, 5, or 6 of those applications are going to get approved, and the rest will not. So the H-1B visa, it is a paradox in that it has the opportunity of getting here far more quickly, but it also has a much higher probability of being denied. And then once you're here on an H-1B visa, okay, your initial H-1B visa is going to be probably issued for a period of 2 or 3 years. After that 2 or 3 years, you have to apply to have that extended, and it can be extended up to 6 years in total. But that application for an extension is essentially a reapplication. And just because your H-1B visa was approved initially, there is no assurance whatsoever that your application for an extension will be approved also. Maybe your employer's financial condition has changed. Maybe your employer's overall hiring and staffing practices have changed. So the H-1B visa brings with it the opportunity to get here faster, but it also brings with it a far, far higher degree of uncertainty than does the EB-3 program. And it also brings with it the opportunity of having a petition just outright denied. And it doesn't give you the assurance of being able to remain in the United States on a permanent basis. So I wanted to just call that out, even though it's not specifically part of our topic today, but it is just one of these questions that we're getting a lot of right now. So I wanted to take just a few minutes and hopefully provide some clarification for you. If we could go to the next slide, please. So in summary then, whether you have an application in process or whether you are just thinking of getting your petition started now, I think the thing that I would like to leave you with as you know at the outcome of this presentation today is just this thought of you can do it. You can do it. If you're just getting started, remember first in, first out. The sooner you start, the sooner you're going to be at the front of the line for visa issuance. EB3 outcomes are highly predictable in a very, very positive way. And we've talked about that several times in our presentation today. And then to just understand that processing times have and always will fluctuate based on the number of visa applications in process. Obviously, there's reason to get excited when the processing times get shorter. There's reasons to be discouraged when they get longer, but just know that that's going to be part of the journey. The visa priority dates have not been static for a prolonged period of time other than that COVID time that we all experienced. I don't think any of us want that to come back. So just have to know that processing times change. And just because processing times are 26 months today, it doesn't mean that they can't be 18 months in the foreseeable future or on October 1st next year or even 12 months. And if we do get some legislative or regulatory reform, who knows, it could be even shorter than that. But the point is, visa processing times fluctuate, sometimes for the better, sometimes not. But the EB3 process is a well-established, predictable process, and you will receive your green card permanent residency visa. So with that, I'll conclude my comments for today, and I'll ask Ali to get us started in our Q&A session. We always are very focused on being respectful of everyone's time. And our commitment always is to keep these presentations to no more than an hour. So we do have some time for questions. And Ali, please, what is the first question that we have today?
The first question is with current I-140 approval processing time.
Hey, Ali, I can barely hear you. You need to really, really speak up.
Can you hear me a little bit better
100%.
now? Okay, perfect. So the first question, with the current I-140 approval processing time exceeding up to a year or more, would Worldwide Health staff consider premium processing to recapture a May 2023 priority date?
Yeah. So a couple parts to that question. The short answer to this is a case-specific question. So where we have cases where somebody has a currently existing priority date, and that petition has been approved, very important, the petition has been approved, then we would use premium processing to bring that case back forward and to not only keep its place in line, but to ensure that that individual is able to arrive in the U.S. in the shortest possible time. So the short answer to that question is yes. But that question also raises a larger point of I-140 adjudication times are upwards or in excess of a year right now. And premium processing is not being used. And I think a reasonable question is, well, why not? Well, the reason why premium processing is not being used at the current time is because it really has no advantage to either the applicant or their employer. What premium processing does is it expedites the length of time that it takes to adjudicate a petition and to issue an approval notice. That's what premium processing does. once a petition is approved, given the current processing dates, you have the peace of mind of knowing you have an approved petition. But you're still waiting an extended period of time given the priority date of December 1, 2022. Premium processing does nothing to move you forward in the line. Premium processing just allows you to have your application adjudicated more quickly in the current environment. Now, where we have, when processing times get down to 15 months, 12 months, in that range, then it is possible that premium processing can have some benefit. It may result in the individual being able to come more quickly. But given that we're currently at 26, 27 months processing times for new petitions, there's really no benefit to be gained in terms of when you're ultimately going to arrive in the United States. Next question.
And then the next question is, going forward, do we expect 3 to 4 months movement per year, more or less?
That's a good question. That's a crystal ball question. And unfortunately, I left my crystal ball at home today. So 3 or 4 months per year. Even if we look back at what the processing times have been in the past, it really, it's interesting, and we could say, well, it's some indication of what's going to happen in the future, but I think it's not a good indication of what's going to happen in the future. I think what we're going to see is that the visa priority dates are going to move forward more than 3 or 4 months per year. That is my expectation. It's my opinion. I don't have any data or science to back that up, and nobody else does either. But in my opinion, I would be optimistic that we're going to see more than 3 or 4 months progress per year, because if that was the case, we'd see the processing times get elongated significantly.
Okay. And then what could happen if the visa screen certificate expires before the due date?
So if someone has a visa screen certificate, maybe you've got this a couple of years ago and it expires, the visa screen certificate needs to be renewed. If it expires, it expires. But if your petition is filed right now, and processing times are 26 months, 27 months, it's going to take you a couple months to get visa screen completed. And 26 or 27 months is still way short of 60 months. So I think you run a very, very low risk of having a visa screen certificate expire if you're applying for it now.
Okay. And then can we still bring our family with us with our EB3 application?
Yeah, 100%. Nothing has changed in terms of the EB3 rules or requirements or opportunities. So all we're talking about here is processing times. The criteria, the requirements for that application have not changed. So 100% yes, immediate family members are included. And just for clarity, immediate family members are defined as a spouse, a legal spouse, and unmarried children under the age of 21.
And then since it is still retrogression, will it affect my assigned state or facility location in the future?
It should not. It should not. Remember that regardless of what is going on with visa processing times, U.S. employers are still facing a nursing shortage. Now, with that being said, employers have extended offers to many, many international nurses, both Worldwide Health Staff and other organizations, have extended job offers at times where perhaps the visa processing times were shorter than they are now. And just like our individual lives change, employers' circumstances may change as well. But I think those occasions are few and far between. And I would be quite confident in saying that the nursing shortage that employers faced at the time that they extended a job offer to you is the same or greater shortage that they face today, and is going to be the same or greater shortage that will exist at the time you're ready to come to the United States.
And then we'll do a couple more. What is the visa screening process, and does it include, and what does it include, and is this necessary for NAs?
Yeah, visa screen not required for NAs. So if this is a question from an NA, the answer is not required. If this question is emanating from someone who's a registered nurse, the visa screen certification process is required. It is required, and you can find details on what is required, the application form, the steps, etc., at cgfns.org. Maybe just type that in, Ali, cgfns.org. That is the organization that administers the visa screen certification program. So you can get detailed information there. And again, we've also done separate webinars just on visa screen on its own. So again, all our past webinars are posted on our YouTube channel, Worldwide Health Staff Solutions. You can get more detailed information there, or you can reach out to our recruitment team, and they'd be happy to assist you as well.
Okay. And then we'll do one more question. Can we apply for Gulf regions while waiting for our due dates?
100% yes. That is absolutely possible. And happy to share with everyone here that we, Worldwide Health Staff Solutions, is also actively recruiting to the Gulf region. So not only can we help you with achieving your American dream, we can also help you with this interim step. We are actively recruiting right now for positions across the United Arab Emirates with one of the most prestigious hospital systems in that part of the world. So the answer is yes, and we would be honored to have the opportunity of helping you in that process as well.
Perfect. And those were all of our questions today. So don't forget to refer a nurse if you know one. You can earn up to $250. And then don't forget to follow us on YouTube and Facebook to stay updated on all of our webinars. Any closing thoughts, Ron?
Yeah, I just saw one question. I think this has popped up a couple times, Ali. I'll just speak to this before we wrap up. The question was, can I apply for TN visa while waiting for my EB3? So that's a pretty case-specific question. I'll answer it generically to say, you can apply for a TN visa if you are a Canadian citizen. But as all visa applications, that application has to be supported by your employer. So the question is, first, is your employer sponsoring TN visas? Yes or no? Are you a Canadian citizen? Yes or no? And then, have you passed the NCLEX exam? Do you have a visa screen certification? Those are all considerations. But I just want to quickly touch on that one point because I think I've seen it come up a couple times. Ali, thanks for your help and guidance today during our presentation. I do appreciate it. Thank you to everyone that joined us. I hope that part of our presentation today included some information that's relevant to you, something that can help you, something that you can use to help yourself plan and move along your journey to the U.S. At Worldwide Health Staff Solutions, it is our pleasure and our privilege, it really is a privilege, to be able to walk alongside with each one of our candidates on their immigration journey to the U.S. Please continue to follow us on our social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, for information on upcoming webinars. Our commitment is to provide informational webinars on a wide variety of topics that will be helpful to you. And the best way to keep up to date on upcoming webinars is through our social media channels, which I invite you to do. Follow us there. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for your time today. We look forward to connecting with each of you again soon. And in the meantime, bye for now.